So, Matt, I wanted to play this AOC stuff because, as longtime listeners of this program know, we've had plenty of criticisms of AOC, particularly about her relationship, to the socialist left, the democratic socialist movement in this country, about some of the things that she has highlighted in her campaigns. We were very upset, obviously, with her decision to come, to stop campaigning for Bernie Sanders, for example, because of the Joe Rogan thing. But this is a moment where if people want to get on the train and they want to join the fight and they want to build this movement that can actually take on not just the right, but the members of the Democratic Party establishment, uh, who are pushing this disastrous campaign, and attacking people all across of all different backgrounds who are trying to say to the Democrats, "You'll have to do something different." We're here for it, and I think it's a really interesting thing. We'll see how far it goes. But AOC's had a very interesting day the day after the election, when it turns out that there were plenty of people in her district who voted for Donald Trump and voted for her. And she's done a lot of events on social media. She's done these kind of Q&As where she went and asked people who supported her, who voted for her, and voted for Donald Trump, what their reasoning was. And I find this to be really interesting and I think correct thing to do as a politician. Just basically understand what the voters want. I think that is your job, and it's going to be interesting to see, how AOC, takes this moment. But we have this clip here, unless you want to add anything before it of AOC.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of folks who we've covered this on Majority Report, talked about, oh, these people are stupid, and it's like, well, if you
Mhm.
better get really good at stealing elections, or you should probably take a listen to what voters actually have to say, and maybe a little bit of humility might go a long way as well.
Yeah, yeah. So this is AOC on Joy Reid's program. Who people remember we covered it last week. Who said Kamala Harris ran a flawless campaign? She got the Queen Latifah endorsement. Uh,
Look, Joy is sort of like Sammy Sosa. It's like sometimes she's a home run if she's covering Gaza. Sometimes it's a strikeout if maybe it's Russia
well,
related.
this is an interesting one here, but let's play AOC. So this is AOC talking about why this swing to Trump happened.
Right. And I think we saw some of that happen as well. But when it comes to people who split their ticket, I think a lot of people cited several different things. One is there is universal frustration in this country, much of it, I actually think, justified, that is raging at a political establishment that centers corporate interests, billionaires, and puts their needs ahead of the needs of working Americans. And we know that we can either channel this righteous rage, because there are people whose SNAP was cut off, their child tax credits were cut off, but they're seeing people like Elon Musk getting tax breaks and kissing up to Donald Trump in order to do
But
so.
they vote for, then why vote for Elon Musk and Donald Trump?
So we're going to get to that second part in a second. But Matt, I mean, what are your reactions to that breakdown from AOC? I mean, I think that especially for that MSNBC audience, noting that people are very upset, and rightfully so. She says about an economy that's more and more unequal, about the power that the rich have in our politics. I mean, that is a very different thing from the Eddie Glaude clip we played last week, or some of the
Yeah.
things that Nancy Pelosi has said about a kind of sober look at what's been going on within the Democratic Party and how it relates to working people.
It's so dangerous, I think, the Glaude method of taxonomizing. Okay, maybe there is a sliver of justified rage, but I actually want to focus on like the white people's rage is about restoring white supremacy. I think that is so goddamn dangerous. And for Democrats to not understand this, which Eddie Glaude was talking about abstaining from voting for Clinton in 2016, and he understood, voting has a lot of moral valencies to it,
Mhm.
and say you don't want to judge somebody who voted for, say, Kamala Harris as a genocide supporter just because that's the most heinous way you could take it. You shouldn't take Republicans as the most heinous way you can take it either.
Mhm.
We should be real that there is a certain appeal to far right policies in this country, but I do not think that is a mass is capable of mass, like being a hegemonic power, unless the actual good people are suppressed by, say, I don't know, a corporate class of people who basically want to commodify the civil rights movements and everything good that's been done in this country as something to sell to donors every 4 years to get fundraising money.
Total. I mean, and like the civil rights movement, you can't think of a better example of that. Something that was connecting to fight for racial justice in this country to the fight against capital and power of entrenched capitalism. And now, there has been this kind of faux fight between fighting for justice for working people and fighting, against racism in America, which is extremely damaging to both projects, by the way. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Because this second response here from AOC, I think, is really interesting, and I think it's very different from maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think the way she's talking about this issue is very different from how she may have talked about it in the abstract a couple years ago, which is understanding, part of Trump's appeal here. So I'll play this, and I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on the other side of this, Matt.
There is something to be said about it doesn't matter that he's lying. He's saying that I'm fighting for you. In all of this debate that people are talking about with this woke thing, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's because we care about trans people, and that's why.
And by the way, only
backlash.
Donald Trump cared about trans people because he was the one running $130 million worth of ads. The Harris campaign said nothing about this issue.
That's right. That's right. And listen, the ads, it's not to even deny the fact that these ads were effective in certain areas. What I think people are paying too much attention to is the first half of that ad, which says Kamala Harris is for they, them. Everyone's focusing on that. They're not focusing on the second half of that ad, where he said, Donald Trump is for you.
Yeah.
And Democrats very often in their messaging, they speak in terms and in concepts and not in the second person. I care about you. And political races are not about one candidate versus another candidate. Too often it gets pigeonholed like that. It is a race to convince a person about who cares about you more.
And just, I would have loved to continue this thread if I had been interviewing AOC. Joy Reid immediately starts pivoting to, talking about how worrying RFK is, which, fine enough topic, but I think, getting somewhere kind of politically interesting.
That's an example. Sorry to cut in, but that's actually a perfect example. Is he's filling a vacuum, and so there's a vacuum being left by the sort of inability for Democrats to move on from Obamacare. And now it's about maintaining Obamacare. In 2016, it was saving Obamacare. Well, what's next? What is actually there? Because affordable, you may have got some patient protections in there, which are welcome. I like when the government does that sort of stuff. You did not make it affordable. The Affordable Care Act is a misnomer. And that is because a failed approach, frankly, comes from a lineage not unfamiliar to maybe Project 2025 type folks. So maybe we actually do need to address things like Medicare for all. And I know like a bunch of people, because of the primary and Bernie Sanders' prominence there, maybe thought, well, this is an avenue to push towards that. I remember Barack Obama in the push for the Affordable Care Act, when I started following politics on a daily basis, reading Ezra Klein's Wonk blog, my RSS feed. It was, maybe we do this and it sets a precedent for a public option, which I will remind people was in Joe Biden's 2020 platform.
Don't get me started on 2020. Yeah. I mean, 100%, man. And like, I think that the way that she's speaking about this issue is really good. And we'll see, how far it goes, where it goes. But I think it's absolutely critical for multiple reasons. One, I can't imagine a better audience to receive this kind of message than the MSNBC one, because there are a lot of desires, I think, to demonize large sections of this country, which, frankly, that kind of politics is wrong on multiple levels, but just on the most like selfish one. If you believe that this country is just kind of like set as like, reactionaries and all these kind of things, then what's the point of politics? Do you know what I mean? It's just like, if this is just how it is, then, what's the point of doing anything? Now, I don't believe that. I think that, people are actually being pretty clear that what they want is an end, to economic system and the insecurity and suffering that is just felt all across this country. And guess what? When you ask people why they voted or didn't vote, they'll tell you usually that. Now, what I think is really great about this clip from AOC, though, is that like one, I think she like is making a real effort to say we should listen to what people are saying instead of pumping all of our kind of nonsense and casting aspersions about what's in their heart or all their what's their morality. But I think the second bit, particularly about recognizing the appeal and the effectiveness of that Trump ad in particular, is it's something that we talked about on this program too, Matt. Is like one of the things that with the trans stuff is we wondered like how effective it was going to be, because as an issue, it's not something that's particularly motivating except for a very specific kind of person. But as AOC noted there, I totally agree, and we said this on the show before the election, was that when you presented it in ways like, look, the Democrats are into like talking about all these other kind of issues. I'm here for you, which is what Donald Trump's final message was there. I think that's a very effective like read on what's going on, and it's critical for two reasons. One, so we understand those voters, and two, because I'll tell you right now, despite the fact that our wing, Matt, Bernie people, Democratic socialists and stuff have been saying that like we want to like mix some kind of reactionary social politics with economic populism, right? You know who is doing that right now? It's all of the goddamn fucking pundits who for the past 8 years were accusing the Bernie movement and DSA members and all these folks of being racist, misogynist, etc. Right? Those are the ones who are going to say, you know what, Donald Trump was really effective with this they/them ad. We need to throw trans people to the wolves. Right? So I think it's decent messaging from her there.